I used to think routine was a sign of stability, that knowing exactly how my days would unfold meant my life was safe and secure. But lately, that routine felt like a cage. My husband was always busy, his phone glued to his hand, his mind occupied with meetings, deadlines, and numbers that didn't involve me. Our conversations had become functional, reminders, schedules, the occasional "did you eat?" But nothing that made me feel like his wife anymore. Nights were quiet, not in a comforting way, but in a lonely, echoing kind of silence. It wasn't that I stopped loving him. I still cared, but I couldn't ignore the way my heart felt lighter when someone actually looked at me. That someone turned out to be closer than I expected. He was my husband's longtime friend, someone I'd known for years. He'd drop by sometimes, quick visits to hand over a file, pick up something my husband forgot, or just to catch up. I never paid much attention, but lately I started noticing small things. The way his eyes lingered just a little longer, the way he actually listened when I spoke, and the rare warmth in his voice when he asked how I was doing. It wasn't dangerous. At least that's what I told myself. A harmless acknowledgement, a reminder that I wasn't invisible. I tried to shake it off, but every time my husband came home late without explanation, that harmless feeling grew heavier. I'd find myself remembering those brief moments of connection. The way a simple smile from him felt more personal than anything I'd received from my own husband in weeks. There's a certain kind of loneliness that's worse than being alone. It's the loneliness you feel when someone is right beside you but hasn't truly seen you in a long time. I had been living in that space for months. My marriage wasn't broken, at least not visibly, but the cracks were there, widening quietly. And every time I noticed them, I wondered if my husband did too, or if he'd stopped looking altogether. I didn't realize how much that distance had changed me until I caught myself thinking differently. I started putting more effort into small things, my hair, my clothes, not for my husband, but for the strange comfort of knowing someone might notice. It wasn't about betrayal, not then. It was about feeling like I still mattered to someone. At night, I'd lie awake and think about how love isn't destroyed all at once. It erodes slowly, with every missed conversation, every moment of indifference, every time you feel unheard. I hadn't planned anything. I didn't even think I was capable of crossing a line. But life has a way of testing you in moments you least expect. And that test was coming sooner than I imagined. Understood. Here's section 2, 500 words. Written as a seamless continuation, no repetition, no unnecessary filler, keeping it sharp A. It was late afternoon when my husband told me he wouldn't be home that night. A business meeting out of town, nothing unusual. I'd heard that line before. I told him it was fine, my voice calm, practiced. I had grown used to these nights alone, used to filling the silence with the hum of the refrigerator or the faint noise from the television. I didn't expect anything different about this one. Not long after, there was a knock at the door. It was his friend. He smiled in that polite, familiar way, holding a folder in his hand. He left this at the office, he explained, his voice casual. Normally, he'd hand it over and leave, but this time he hesitated. I noticed it in the way his eyes stayed on mine a fraction longer, in the pause before he stepped back. I don't know why, but I asked if he wanted a coffee before heading off. The air shifted as he stepped inside. It wasn't obvious, but there was something about the quiet of the house that made every sound more noticeable, every breath heavier. We sat across from each other, the conversation light at first, work updates, small talk, harmless subjects. But slowly, it slipped into something different. He mentioned how I'd seemed quieter lately, how my smile didn't reach my eyes anymore. It caught me off guard. My husband hadn't noticed anything in months. Yet here was someone pointing it out in a few minutes. I laughed it off at first, but my voice wavered. It felt strange to have someone notice the cracks I'd been pretending weren't there. He didn't push, but he didn't look away either. That steady attention, that genuine interest, it made the room feel smaller somehow, as if the air between us carried more weight than it should. The rain outside tapped softly against the windows, a rhythm that seemed to underline the quiet tension building. I realized I hadn't felt this kind of awareness in years. His presence wasn't loud or overwhelming. It was quiet, deliberate, and it made me more conscious of myself than I wanted to admit. He stood eventually, saying he should leave, but even in that moment, there was hesitation. Something unspoken lingered in the air, something neither of us acknowledged out loud. As I walked him to the door, I caught his glance again. It wasn't inappropriate, not exactly, but it was different. And for a brief second, I felt the dangerous comfort of being seen. When he left, the house felt different. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was charged. I didn't understand what that meant yet, but I knew this night would stay with me. I also knew that this wasn't the last time I'd think about him. Here's section 3, 500 words. Keeping it tight, emotional, and without repetition. Delivering the pivotal moment from the title. The next time I saw him, it wasn't planned. My husband was away again, another late-night meeting that didn't surprise me anymore. I was at home, moving through my usual routine, trying to fill the quiet with simple tasks. I didn't expect a knock at the door, but when I opened it, there he was again, holding something my husband had forgotten. I invited him in without thinking, the ease of familiarity disguising the undercurrent I'd been ignoring. We spoke briefly, casual words exchanged like any other visit, but something felt different. There was a shift in the air, the kind you don't notice until you're in the middle of it. He looked at me the way someone does when they're caught off guard, like they're seeing something they weren't prepared for. It happened so subtly I didn't realize the moment was changing until it was already there. He stepped into the room, his voice trailing as his eyes met mine, then dropped briefly, hesitating as if he'd crossed an invisible line just by looking. I could see the surprise in his face, the way he tried to mask it, the way he quickly apologized. But it was too late. The silence between us was no longer empty. It was thick with meaning. I didn't move. I didn't say anything to ease his discomfort. I could have laughed it off, pretended nothing had happened. But I didn't. For the first time in a long time, I felt someone's attention completely focused on me, unfiltered and undeniable. I realized how much I had missed being seen that way, how much I had missed being a thought in someone's mind that wasn't out of obligation. He hesitated, searching for the right words, but there weren't any. His reaction told me everything he wouldn't dare say. I felt a strange mixture of guilt and relief, because in that instant, I wasn't invisible anymore. The weight of being noticed pressed against everything I'd been holding inside for months. I could feel my heart beating faster, not because of what might happen next, but because of what it meant. This wasn't about him exactly, it was about me, about the person I had almost forgotten I was. He didn't take a step forward, and I didn't ask him to, but the moment was already written in the way we stood there, caught in the same thought neither of us spoke aloud. When he finally looked away, it wasn't because the feeling had disappeared. It was because it had become too real to keep staring at. I still didn't stop him. I didn't change the way I stood or the way I looked at him. And in that stillness, I knew something had shifted that couldn't be taken back. Do you want me to go ahead with section 4, 500 words? To complete the full arc and leave the open-ended emotional hook. Here's section 4, 500 words. Final act, keeping it sharp, emotional and open-ended with no repetition. After he left, the room felt heavier, as if the air itself was holding on to everything unspoken between us. I stood there longer than I should have, my thoughts circling in silence. There was no clear right or wrong in that moment, only the certainty that something had shifted inside me. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that I could go back to how things were before, but deep down I knew that wasn't true. That night, when my husband returned, everything looked the same. His voice carried the same tired tone. His attention split between work calls and half-finished sentences meant for me. He didn't notice anything unusual, didn't sense the quiet storm beneath my calm responses. I realized then how easy it was to hide feelings when the person you're hiding them from stopped looking a long time ago. The days that followed didn't bring clarity, only more questions. I found myself replaying that moment, not because of what was said or done, but because of how it made me feel. It was a reminder that I wasn't invisible, that I could still evoke a reaction in someone. It wasn't about betrayal in the way most people would define it. It was about the ache of being overlooked for so long that even a glance could feel like oxygen. I tried to act normal, to settle back into routine, but the normal I had known no longer fit. Small details stood out more now. My husband's distracted expressions, the silence at dinner, the way I hesitated before answering his questions. None of it was deliberate, yet everything felt different. I wasn't sure if I was waiting for something to happen or if something already had. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was afraid of judgment, but because I didn't know how to explain it in a way that would make sense. It wasn't about the moment itself. It was about what that moment revealed. It showed me how far I had drifted, how quietly the distance had grown between my husband and me, and how easily someone else could step into that space. Life went on as it always did. My husband left for work in the mornings, I managed the house, and the world outside moved without knowing what had changed inside mine. But every now and then, I'd catch myself thinking about that night, about the look on his friend's face, about the silence that said more than words ever could. I never planned for it to happen. I didn't seek it out. Yet when it came, I didn't stop it either. And maybe that was the real truth I wasn't ready to face, that sometimes it's not a decision we make in the moment, but the quiet acceptance of something we've been waiting for without even realizing it. Do you want me to now combine all 4 sections, 2,000 words total, into a single, polished script for the faceless video narration? It will flow seamlessly without section breaks.